tragedy of World War II, the Allies, who triumphed over Germany, divided Germany and its capital Berlin between themselves in order to strengthen Germany before reuniting it. With the Four-Power Agreement, which was agreed upon when they divided Germany, the British, the Americans, and the French would feed Berlin 2/3 of its food. The Soviets would supply the remaining 1/3 of Berlin's food. The Americans and the British combined their sectors, calling them Bizonia and then Trizonia, after the French joined their sector with the American and the British sectors. In doing so, they aimed to make a stronger economy and, in the end, a trade partner out of Germany. The Soviets, whose sectors surrounded Berlin, were not very happy about this and decided to cut off all British, American, and French water, rail, and ground transportation to Berlin, including the food supply. The Soviets also stopped energy from going into Berlin and stopped feeding the city the 1/3 of food they agreed on. The British and Americans collaborated their air forces to bring in supplies to the starving people of West Berlin. The British and the Americans voiced that they would not pull out of Berlin. Most of the German people in West Berlin would resist the Soviets if they knew that the Western countries would support them. The Soviets could stop the Western Allies from bringing in supplies by air, but that might start a new war, which no one in war-weary Europe wanted. During this endeavor to triumph over hunger, an American pilot by the name Gales Halvorsen started dropping precious packages of candy from the airplanes to the children and people of West Berlin to give them hope and to give them joy in the tragedy that they faced. In the middle of the tragedy of the Berlin blockade, Operation Little Vittles was a triumph that gave hope to the people of West Berlin because they saw that somebody cared and stood behind them. Gales Halvorsen and other pilots dropped candy over West Berlin to the people that needed hope and found it in the taste of candy from the heavens. They not only got hope, but also a glimpse of better days. This hope that was gained from just a little act of compassion went as far as reuniting the country of Germany. A little act like dropping candy can make a big difference. The people obtained hope because they saw that somebody cared and stubbornly stuck with them and stuck up for them. The Berlin Airlift was funded and planned by the British, the Americans, and the French to keep Berlin from the Soviets and communism. These countries went to all that work and hoped that someday they might be able to make Germany a democracy and free it from the Soviets and communism. A man who lived in Berlin during the blockade said,
"Suddenly, out of the mist came a parachute with a fresh Hershey chocolate bar from America. It took me a week to eat that candy bar. I hid it day and night. The chocolate was wonderful, but it wasn't the chocolate that was most important. What it meant was that someone in America cared. That parachute was something more important than candy. It represented hope. Hope that someday we would be free. Without hope, the soul dies."
This man was 10 years old in West Berlin during the blockade. The Germans even saw hope in the midst of darkness because of the Western Allies. By dropping precious packages of candy, the people tasted a glimpse of better days to come. Mercedes Simon was one of the many children who sent letters, maps, thank yous, and requests for candy to the candy pilot. In her letters, she talked about the chickens not laying eggs because of the plague. She wrote that if he dropped candy in the garden, all would be okay. 4 boys tried to catch some candy for their mother, who worked hard but never caught some. Their mother wrote the pilot on October 15, 1948. In her letter, she asked,
"Is there another way to fulfill this request for 5 hungry souls?"
She gave him a photo and return address, and the organization sent them candy. The people barely knew what the exquisite taste of candy was like. Seeing that there were better days in little packages from the heavens gave them hope that there might be better days to come if they just hung on. The Western Allies built approach lights in a cemetery because Tempelhof Airport, even though it wasn't a field, was hard to approach and land because it had tall apartments on the edges of it. The Western Allies also put them in because it was often foggy over Berlin and hard to see. Gales Halvorsen tried to give hope to the Soviet side of Germany by dropping candy on it, but the Soviets complained and he was ordered to stop. The Soviets went even farther. As if the blockade wasn't enough, they started saying that the Western Allies would not leave the dead alone because they built the approach lights in the cemetery. However, whatever the Soviets said about the British, the Americans, and the French, there were many times where grateful German people said thank you to the pilots for the hope they had given them in the midst of the tragedy of the Berlin blockade, by giving them gifts of fresh flowers in the winter and other gifts. Such as one little girl who gave her beloved teddy bear to the chocolate pilot. She said, "Take good care of him for me," for he had been her comfort in the cellar during the bombing of Berlin in World War II. The pilot tried to give the bear back, but the girl would not hear of it. Another act of thanks was when a little girl and her mother made a gingerbread Santa of the chocolate pilot. There were many, many other thanks to the chocolate pilot in unique ways and letters. The people of West Berlin were thankful for the triumph over hunger and fear in the face of the tragedy of the Soviet occupation.
Do not give up on us. We can live without everything we want to eat, if someday we have our freedom.
A little act of compassion went as far as reuniting the divided country of Germany. Germany did not become communist because of the Western Allies stubbornly staying in Berlin and keeping it alive. In the dark of communism, West Berlin was a light, which eventually grew to reunite the country of Germany. Gillis Halvorson's father said that from little things come big things. Mr. Halvorson proved that quote true when his little act turned out to be the hope for the people of West Berlin.
How is it that the little things in life can provide the most joy and the greatest blessings? Service to others, as the Savior taught, provides those magical moments. The exhortation to serve, to love, is so simple, but its blessings so complex.
The people of West Berlin had hope because they saw the triumph of better days to come, and now knew that they had someone to lean on when times got tough. When the tragedy of the Soviet occupation fell over East Germany, West Berlin was not taken because they had hope, patience, loyalty, and bravery in the face of hunger, toil, sadness, sorrow, and the tragedy of the Berlin blockade. Within the story, there are lessons that were learned by the characters that we can look at and learn from. Even if we do not feel like our acts are being watched by others, our acts will have a triumphant or tragic effect on people.